Did Jesus really fail to fulfill the prophecy of Luke 9:27? It reads, "But I tell you truly, some of you standing here will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God." Uh-oh, that's a problem. But not for us Christians, only for the critics of Christianity who want to claim that this is a failed prophecy, because the prophecy has already been fulfilled. But wait, not in the way that they imagine it. Critics will often say that this verse here is talking about the second coming of Jesus, but that is deliberately incorrect. As we see here, Jesus is saying, there are some of you standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God. Now, this implies that some of these people will taste death before they see the kingdom of God. So, some of the common Christian interpretations of this verse are that this here is talking about the transfiguration, the resurrection, or the Pentecost, or the destruction of the temple. Now, it couldn't have been the transfiguration because that happened about 6 or so days later. All of the disciples were still alive 6 days later. Nobody died, like this verse is suggesting. So it couldn't have been the transfiguration. All right, so maybe it was the resurrection. Well, again, none of the disciples, aside from Judas, had died. But this verse suggests that more than one of the disciples are going to die. Some standing here who will not taste death. Not one standing here or none standing here. There are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God. So this is suggesting that at least more than one are going to die by the time this event occurs. We have ruled out the transfiguration and now the resurrection. What about the Pentecost? So at the Pentecost, the Spirit comes, the church begins. But the problem with this is that all of the disciples are still alive, again, aside from the exception of Judas. So again, the death timeline here isn't matching. So although these events here are very key events in redemptive history, they don't exactly match the timeline that Jesus is trying to give here. So that leaves one more option. If it's not the transfiguration, and if it's not the resurrection, and if it's not the Pentecost, and it's not the second coming, because they would have all been dead by then, because they're all dead now, that leaves one more event, and that would be the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. Now, let's look at the destruction of the temple and see if it matches. So when the destruction of the temple occurs, the old covenant is judged. Christ's authority and kingdom are now fully manifest. This is officially the destruction of the old covenant. Now, not all of the disciples were dead, like John was still alive, but many had already been martyred by this point. So, some standing here who will not taste death until they see the kingdom of God. More than one have already died by this point. Now, the reason why I think Jesus here is talking about the destruction of the temple is because it's the only event that holds the theological and chronological weight of this statement. Because, okay, so we've looked at the tasting death part of it, but what about see the kingdom of God? What does it mean to see the kingdom of God? It's not necessarily this spiritual experience or this internal revelation. It's a visible and historical shift, such as the kingdom coming in power and judgment, as we see in the destruction of the temple. In fact, we see Jesus talking about this in Luke 21 here, where he's talking about the destruction of the temple, talking about what things are going to be leading up to this. So in Luke 9, Jesus isn't talking about the second coming when he is saying that some of you standing here will not taste death. No, instead he is talking about a judgment on Israel. Not only was it a judgment on Israel, but it also signaled the arrival and supremacy of his kingdom. So, once again, was Luke 9:27 a failed prophecy? Was Jesus lying to us, or was he wrong? No. When we take into account these things, it is a fulfilled prophecy, just as Jesus describes. So these are the things we can take into account. The phrase, "some will not taste death," the timeline of the disciples' deaths, the significance of the temple destruction, and then finally the old covenant's visible collapse. the evidence points to this verse talking about the destruction of the temple, not the second coming of Christ. So I hope that you found this video helpful. I hope you found it useful. If you have had this question, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and God bless.